trying to think how to get a picture of what we're looking at this next Sunday, John chapter 7 and 8. Kind of capture what's going on there, and it's hard because it's hard to think of anything really comparable to it. We can think of some kind of a talk show, debate show, The View or Donnybrook or something, where people come maybe holding different viewpoints and they debate with each other, maybe even argue, maybe even get a little angry or something. But that's not a big enough scale, So I thought, well, maybe some things that happen sometimes on college campuses. There's divergence of opinions, and people, college kids can be pretty, forceful and committed to their ideals and philosophies, or professors or whatever. And maybe that's closer, but for better or worse, what really has come to mind is the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, in August of that year, '68. For what I know of it, maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you're not, but it was a time of violence and threatened violence, and a time when there were some issues that were being decided upon, that were volatile, emotional, and very controversial. And it was a party in division, a lot of different voices, a lot of different opinions, a lot of different directions over these controversial, very emotional issues, and people trying to come together and pull it together. There was backroom deals going on, and some people would deny that was happening, and other people knew that was happening, and some people were out of the loop of what was happening, and they're trying to find unity, trying to find people with different opinions, and very important, and very emotional, and kind of like a powder keg. And that's kind of want to see what's happening in John chapter 7 and 8. As we come into John chapter 7, we're heading into Feast of the Passover, Feast of Tabernacles. In chapter 6, it was Passover time, which would have been around April. As we get to chapter 7, verse 2, it's time for the Feast of the Tabernacles, which would have been October. So as you read in chapter 7, when you read verse 1, understand that summarizes basically 6 months. Chapter 7, verse 1 summarizes 6 months. So between chapter 6, chapter 7, verse 2, there's a 6-month period. Keep in mind, too, as we head into the Feast of Tabernacles in chapter 7 and 8, there's only 6 months left until Jesus goes to the cross. So we're really heading down toward the final times here, and it's getting intense. The Feast of the Tabernacles was a great time of celebration. It lasted about 8 days, held every year in Jerusalem, and it was to commemorate a couple different things. One is the harvest, and so in a sense it was kind of like a Thanksgiving deal, like would be for us. But also it was to remind them about the Exodus, when they came out of Egypt, and how God took care of them, how they wandered in the wilderness. So, some things that would happen during the Feast of Tabernacles that why don't you watch for as you read chapter 7 and chapter 8, because Jesus, always being the master teacher, is able to use different things to illustrate the truth of who he is with what's going on around him. Every day during the Feast of Tabernacles, they'd have a parade of water, basically. They'd take water from a pool there nearby and take it in, and then they would pour it out by the altar and talk about how this is water and salvation, and quote a scripture from Isaiah. And so think about the water thing, and the pouring out the water and talking about water of salvation. Also, there'd be basically a parade of lights with torches and the special menorah or candelabra, and what Jesus does with the issue of light in these chapters. And then another thing with the Feast of Tabernacles was that it's also called the Feast of Booths, or tents, and they would camp out in tents to remind them when they wandered through the Exodus, through the wilderness, and slept in makeshift tents and homes and things like that. So as you read through chapter 7 and chapter 8, several things to look for. Look for those three elements of how Jesus might make use of those, taken from the feast and the celebration, and tries to use them to illustrate a spiritual truth. Look for three different groups of people and how they react and what's going on with them. There's the group that John calls the Jews, which are the religious leaders. There would be the local folks from around Jerusalem, the crowd who lived there locally. Then there also would be a group of pilgrims who'd come from far and wide for the celebration as well. And so look for those three different groups there: the Jews, which were the leaders, the local crowd, and the pilgrims who'd come in from some distance. And then one other three to look for in chapter 7 the three different conclusions that people come to about who Jesus is. And it's toward the end of chapter 7. So that's another 3 to kind of look for as you read through that. But the general idea is, even in the midst of all the chaos and the shouting, the arguing, the debating, the whispering, the division among the people, the widespread and fluctuating guesses about who Jesus is, even in the midst of all this circus, the voice of Jesus still comes through clearly, of who he says he is and what he offers. It just penetrates, cuts right through all the noise and all the hoopla. And even in the midst of all this circus, some people are still able to come to believe in Jesus Christ. So I want you to think about that and relate to the world we live in today. Even with the division and the different opinions about Jesus and things that are said that are right and wrong and lies and accusations and whisperings, and even in the midst of all the diversity, Jesus' voice is still heard clearly as he makes his call for people to come to him. And even in the midst of all this, we still can be a people who come to faith in Jesus. So chapter 7 and chapter 8. See you Sunday.